Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and head to my presentation so that I can share that as I speak. I'm going to give a comparison of Japan to the United States. We're going to look at this from a national level. So if we look at the national standards from the United States, this will be our national core art standards. And if we're looking at that from Japan, we're looking at a national set of curriculum guidelines, which are governed by the Ministry of Education, which is going to be equivalent to our federal government. Let's first go with rigor. So both are very rigorous in nature. Both do a really good job of laying out what students should be learning in the arts and why they are both why art is significant. Both also include all fine arts. And for this particular research, we're going to look at this as far as the visual arts are concerned. But definitely both detail the benefits of art education. Both have a slightly different aim or focus, which we'll go over later. But there's definitely more of a, from Japan's standpoint, a top-heavy suggestion, which comes out from the Ministry of Education on what everyone should be doing, where the United States is going to give a more broad, loose interpretation that states can define more. And that's because we give more power to our state to local governments. But definitely there is academic rigor, and there are a lot of similarities between the both of us. Okay, let's change slides. As far as coherence is concerned, like I mentioned, as far as the organization is concerned, there's definitely a lot of similarity. In the US, we have content standards with achievement standards that are presented. We talk about artistic process. We have anchor standards, which kind of take us deeper into the organization of our objectives. And we definitely focus specifically to discipline in the arts. In Japan, we don't define discipline, but I think that is a known factor, and that is the way that the culture is. But as far as art objectives are concerned, and the organization of that content, there are definitely some similarities in how we present objectives and the nature that's determined by a national set of curriculum guide. They talk about the objectives, the content, and this expression to appreciation, or different category for expression, appreciation, and what they call common matter, which is basically a skill for creating and responding, very similar to us as well. There's some slight differences in grade levels. For the US, we know we go K through 12. We present standards based on K through 4 or K through 5, actually. And then 6 to 8, which is our middle range, and our high school 9 to 12. In Japan, you start at first grade, so you kind of have your standards set forth in blocks of first and second grade, third and fourth, fifth and sixth, and seventh through ninth. I didn't see a lot on high school information, and I couldn't figure out if that was because I need to do some more research. But do they stop at the ninth grade and then go into a post-secondary environment? But I did do some reading that they actually have entrance exams for each level. And I know that there is an entrance exam at the high school level. So I'm also wondering if that has something to do with this. But I believe that they might not go all the way to 12th grade with what we call this block of education. That might be a post-secondary environment. Assessment. US definitely has performance standards that translate, and we define measurable learning goals, or we aim towards proficiency in data. In Japan, it was very interesting. There is not a lot of documentation on assessment, and it is not as defined as everything else they present. The next would be going into our focus with US to Japan. US, sorry about that, keeps moving here. The US focuses or places emphasis on content standards and achievement. We talk about application, knowledge of structures. We talk about concept, history and culture, reflection, and making connections to the world around us or to our other academics. In Japan, they focus on 5 objectives for education and courses of study that are offer a very broad overall objective. There is a holistic focus that is of knowledge and culture. There's an independence and an autonomy, which is very interesting because to me, I find that to be very a lot of freedom that's included. There is career to practical life, and we also focus on that with our 21st century goals. There is a focus on responsibility, respect, equality, life, and connection to nature, which I love. There is the focus on love of country, or respect for other cultures, and world peace. Very similar to us, actually, but we just state it with different words. Slightly different, but we have kind of a different language for the two. Attitude is very different. Focus on attitude is a lot more. There's more of an expectation from Japanese culture. From here, we're going to talk about the specifics. In the US, content standards are associated with achievement standards, and they are discipline specific. Performance is indicated at grade level, and proficient to advanced levels are identified. Each discipline also has its own language for addressing goals and approaches, and we're talking about from the national level again. Japan has 5 goals for education, which are defined. There's also courses of study that define and offer broad overall objectives to apply teaching and learning at each grade level. And more specific objectives per grade level are also appropriated with content suggested. And this is further guided into 3 categories. So it'll say objective, and then it'll have these 3 categories that talk about decision-making, appreciation, and what they call common matter, which is your skill development. And that's divided into 2 sections, creating and responding. So slightly different layout, but specific and very similar in a way to what we, how we teach it here. Let me move this so you can see what I have on my screen. When we talk about US and Japan as far as clarity and accessibility, in the US, we have 4 domains, which are connected to 11 anchor standards. If you look at the website for the national standards, they are broadly defined, and curriculum standards are set more independently by individual states, where we have more guidance. In Japan, we have 5 key objectives specifically laid out in course of study with objective and content, and clearly guided with a syllabus designed for educators, which is different. We don't have that much clarity as far as what that looks like from a national standpoint as in the US. Then when you are looking at accessibility, both are very accessible. I can actually find documentation for both. Obviously, we know where the national standards are located. There are some nice graphic organizers now, and there are some ways that you can click into each one of those categories, and you could look at the anchor standards. And you could download PDF documents laying out the conceptual framework for each. Japan, again, also very similar. And I really thought there was a similarity between how we present our state standards to the way that is provided on a national level. The documents are pretty similar in nature, but easy to access and easy to see what is expected or guide or laid out for us. As far as the similarities and differences, some of them I've already talked about. Ways we differ. Education requirements, and we're going to kind of talk about this from what we know about US to what ways we differ with Japan. So the educational requirements are different. In Japan, they require an entrance exam at every grade level, which I thought was interesting. And this, I thought, could have something to do with the way we focus on our assessment. And we focus on it a lot, and they don't so much. It could be because they look at this exam going into everything with the data that they're providing. And they're doing that at the beginning of the cycle, rather we're doing it kind of at the end, which I thought was very interesting. Curriculum requirements, Japan has more national control. They call that the balance of education, or providing a more balanced education, rather than the US gives us more power to local districts. So top down from Japan, and then we're going from more bottom level control in the United States. Education administration, Japan has more of a collegial approach in nature to hiring staff that's very knowledgeable in their content. Students wear uniforms. There is a principal for every school, and there's an active headmaster who's strongly immersed in the classrooms as well. There's a strong recycling program. There's no public transportation, and there is more student participation in the actual day-to-day functions of the school. That could be cleaning duties, that could be gardening duties, that could be serving food duties or preparing food. So they get more involved in, totally different from the United States, in the day-to-day operations. They're a part of it. Student attitude is definitely different. Japan being more formal, more moral instruction. There's a high level of motivation and achievement. The expectation is totally different there. And there is a drive for the culture of learning within each classroom, which I thought was wonderful. Similarities between us. The focus on education is very similar. Both countries are committed, and they are very committed to the arts. I found both national standards and Ministry of Education standards to be very thoughtful in how we think about the development of an artist, and also the significance of art and its impact in time past and present. I found them to be both very good. The structure of education is similar, the organization from a national to a state, and giving some discretion to localities. We both do it, we just do it kind of backwards, I would say. As far as education, it's mandatory on both sides, a little bit different, but it is required, and it is free. Circular requirements both have a student plan of study, extracurricular activities on both sides, and teacher requirements. Both are committed to hiring a strong, qualified staff, highly prepared or qualified. That's the word I was looking for. Teachability. Japan provides clear expectation and guidelines or guidance through standards in a meaningful, organized manner. This is also the same for the US. We give a little bit more, we're more vague from a national standard or standpoint. However, when we develop more continuity across state government. Less guidance on assessment. As far as Japan is concerned, there's not a lot of documentation there. I'm not really sure how they put that together. That would be really interesting to study a little bit more into if you wanted to think about achievement levels in the United States and Japan. Why are we so different? And then there is a syllabus included that for the educator to use in Japan. So that's very teachable, set forth curriculum package. In the US, we definitely have some differences there, and we have more focus on student achievement that is measurable. We probably have a little bit more freedom in our design of curriculum. Personal conclusions. Basically, I enjoyed getting to look at a little bit more of Japanese culture. I've always heard things or, seen clips of how school is conducted in Japan or in an Asian culture. So this was very interesting to kind of look at actual standards. I do see a lot of similarities, but I also see some things about the Japanese culture, which I know I'm attracted to Eastern concepts, but there's definitely a very high achievement level there. But there's also a difference in our two cultures, especially in our day and age and where we are today in America. I definitely think there's more of a spirit for country and culture and respect. I do see well-being on both sides, but I think there is a little bit more of a holistic approach to not just like mental health, mental well-being and student performance, but also to that connection in the world around us, or that connection to nature, which is a focus for the Japanese culture. I don't think we do that as much here in the United States. And I wish we would. In America, I don't think we set time for that. And so I think that's part of our problem. We definitely do not carry that as an expectation for our students. There's a level of respect, I think, in the school that we tend to foster to extracurricular pride for a school mascot or for our school campus. But I think there's a little bit more of a expectation from the Japanese culture on how we all take care of our space, which I love. I think we do that as art educators. We create a studio, and that could be why our studios tend to be very inviting for our students, because we do have this expectation and they develop pride for their classroom, I think, in a way that's very different from some of their other courses that they take. And pretty much as far as everything I mentioned, it was really interesting to see those similarities. There's some strong similarities in our design for standards, especially if you were to compare the Georgia state standards to the Ministry of Education standards in Japan. I thought that was very interesting. It'd be neat to go through that very specifically. I also am really curious about looking at achievement. If we know students are achieving at a high level in Japanese schools, I would really like to see the way that they administer assessment and get a good idea for what those assessment tools look like. And it sounds like with entrance exams, that gives them a good bit of data from the beginning that they might be using to shape the course of their curriculum for that year, or for what they call their school or classroom culture, which would be very interesting to look at. But anyway, if you have any questions, let me know. I've got several studies and a lot of information on Japanese schools. And thank you very much. Can't wait to read everybody's or watch everybody else's presentation.